Thank you to all my channel members, including my fan appreciation level members and my contributor level members, for helping support the YouTube channel. Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my non-spoiler book review of Trials of the Jedi by Charles Soule. This is the final novel in the High Republic series. As I mentioned, this will be spoiler-free. Not going to talk about any spoilers. I'll have to do those in another video. And for those who are wondering, after I make this video and the spoiler video, I do plan on making a few other videos for the end of the High Republic, talking about ranking all of the High Republic novels, as well as going through and doing like a post-series, talking about what worked, what didn't work, and all that stuff. So there's going to be a lot of High Republic content in the next month or so, where I'm going to, kind of talk about the series in whole now that it's concluding. I still have a few pieces of the comics or manga or stuff to read, but overall, this is the end of the series, and so it's time to start doing that end of the series stuff. So, with all that being said, let's talk about this book. As I mentioned, it's the final High Republic book written by Charles Soule. He actually wrote the first High Republic novel, Light of the Jedi, which I actually did read on release day and read it and reviewed it on Goodreads. I didn't have the YouTube channel at the time. I got it very soon afterwards. And so this is his first novel in Star Wars since, so he bookends the High Republic series. He had the first book in the series and he has the last book in the series. And Charles Soule just has a way with prose that is beautiful. There are authors who will write overly flowery prose and it just gets annoying. And then there are other authors who write such simple prose and you're like, can you add a little bit more to this? Make it more than just what you have here? But Charles Soule has this way of blending the two that is just beautiful. When you're reading the book, there are times where he pauses, he describes the world, where he really focuses on making allusions or making references or not like references like Easter eggs, like references to how things feel, for making things tactile, for making metaphors. He especially, for characters like Avar, likes to describe the Force as a song, and so he uses musical terms to describe how the Force is working. And when he needs to do that, it's beautiful to read. And then there are other times where we're in an action scene. We need to have some characters fighting each other. That's what we need to do. You don't need to be spending all that time with slowing stuff down. It's great. So Charles Soule is able to get the best of both worlds in his writing, which is one reason I think it hits so hard, is when it's meant to hit, oh boy, it hits you hard. And then you're back to the regular story. This book had a tall order to complete the series because the High Republic is not only long, but it has so many characters and they're in so many different places, so many storylines, so many types of villains in the High Republic, and so many so many plot threads to complete and so many different directions authors were taking things. So this book had a high bar to reach, and the book's not terribly long. Some of the editors of this book had kind of marketed it as one of the longer Star Wars books. It's not even the longest book in the High Republic series. So it's only about 420 pages. So it's decent size for a Star Wars book, but it's not like, Timothy Zahn, some of his longer books sized even. So, for as short as it is, Charles Soule has to wrap up a lot. And there's some plot threads that are, in the YA or middle grade books that are kind of tied up there, but there's a lot of stuff that he ties up really well in this book. And there was also a lot writing on this book. I think that the High Republic, as much as I've loved it and I've had so many problems with it, it needed to stick the landing for its legacy to be solid, and I think that this book does stick that landing. I have a few nitpicks, most of which are spoiler related, so I can't really get into the nitpicks here, but other than those nitpicks, it is a truly fantastic ending to the series. Charles Soule, in this book, is able to give a satisfying ending that both gives sometimes what we want, sometimes things we don't want, and then sometimes he gives us what we had no idea we needed or wanted, and then sometimes he gives us what we don't want, but we didn't realize, what it could have been. So there's gonna be a few characters that die. There's gonna be a few characters that go off and do things that you're not gonna love. But I think that he handles it really well. This isn't, he doesn't subvert expectations where he just does something for pure shock value. He does things where you don't see it coming, but then you feel it was an inevitable part of the story, that it had to happen that way. And he does an excellent job with that. So in terms of being a satisfying conclusion, yes, I'm sad by the direction that some of the characters go, but it's a satisfying conclusion. Getting into a little bit about the book is separated into 5 parts, although the first part is the largest part in the book, longest part, I should say. And each part has an interlude at the beginning that follows this family on this planet that is dealing with the Blight. And as I read these interludes, it reminded me of some of the chapters in the book series The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, specifically the ones that Brandon Sanderson finished, the last 3 books. There's some chapters in here that reminded me of some chapters in there that I felt like were a way of contrasting the big epic stuff happening with how everyday people are having to deal with stuff. Particularly if you've read the prologue to The Gathering Storm and the interludes in here, I think that you'll find that they're very, very similar. So Charles Soule is able to balance the big and the epic with the small. There's some great character journey stuff. If you've been following the series, you know that there's some stuff happening with Avar and Elzar, and their relationship goes through an interesting dynamic in this book. There's also some stuff happening with characters like Bel Zettifar and Buri Yaga and Reith Silas and a few others, and even the character of Aislinn Rell, who I think really has shocked me throughout this series. Of course, Charles Soule doesn't just do a good job with the good guys, he also does an excellent job with the villains. Not only is Gira Staros written quite well in this book, but Marchion Ro is at his best when Charles Soule's writing him. Not only was Marchion excellent in Light of the Jedi and in Trials of the Jedi, he was also excellent in the 2-issue miniseries The Eye of the Storm, which is all about Marchion. And yes, I'm pronouncing it Marchion. I know that some people pronounce it Marchion, but it's a CH. So, anyway, I'd accept Marchion, but I say Marchion. Anyway, so Marchion Ro is terrifically written in this book, and you really understand him in a way that we have not really up until this point. You've learned about him, you've understood him a little bit, but you finally come to a full understanding, and I thought that was really interesting, and it made all of his machinations, whatever, it made them all really make sense. Also, this book had some just terrific visuals. That's something that Charles Soule did great in Light of the Jedi, is it was so visual. I could picture everything happening. When the great disaster happened, I could see it happening in my mind's eye. When you saw the Nile ship crash into the ship in the big ship in the great disaster, I could see that happening in my brain. And that's exactly what happened to me with Trials of the Jedi. I could see some of the visuals happening. I thought it was just gorgeously written. Charles Soule, as I mentioned, really writes the Force interestingly, and I love the way he writes, the way Avar sees the Force, the way that Bel sees the Force, things like that. He does something regarding balance in the Force that I think is going to be very controversial to the fandom, but it's minor enough, and what I'll say is, in the book, when you're reading the book, it's beautifully written. But if you are someone who really cares about the way the Force is written, and you really care about the semantics of how George Lucas meant the Force to be versus how Dave Filoni versus how Charles, if you're that person that gets caught up in that, you might get a little bit frustrated in part of the ending here. But even I, who feel a little bit like, that doesn't exactly work in universe, in this book, it makes sense, and it's beautifully handled. And I'm willing to suspend that disbelief a little bit for how beautifully it works in this book, despite the fact that the mechanics, I'm not sure it works that way. we do also have, the Blight and the Nameless and the Nile as the main villains. These three, well, two of the groups are connected, but you know what I mean. There's the main villains of this series, and the Nile were handled pretty well. Although I will say they obviously felt like the B storyline, whereas the A storyline was the whole stuff with the Blight and the Nameless and Marchion and the Jedi going to that planet. And I just thought it was all just excellently handled. And also, there was a moment in this book where I realized, wait a second, that's why they're called that? That's why this is called this? Oh, that makes so much sense. How did I not put those together? I will also say that this book really adds some context to some of Phase 2. There's several events that happened in Phase 2 of the High Republic that I feel much more that this book gives them a satisfying reason to exist. I still feel like Phase 2 didn't work as well as it should have, but this book really makes a lot of that worth it. Not everything, but a lot of it worth it. So, man, this book, I'm gushing about it. I thought it was terrific. I thought it was beautifully written. I think that Charles Soule is a tremendous Star Wars writer, and now that I've been able to see 2 novels from him. The first one was not a fluke. Light of the Jedi was just not a one-off for him. He's proven with Trials of the Jedi that he can write excellent Star Wars prose. I hope he comes and does something else. Maybe give him an Old Republic trilogy. Maybe give him a standalone novel somewhere. Whatever. Give Charles Soule more Star Wars novels because he can write excellent prose. And I really enjoyed this a lot. I feel very satisfied, and I'm glad that I feel satisfied because I was worried that this series would feel too daunting and that it wouldn't be able to wrap up well. But this is quite the wrap-up. I would, my friends and I who have talked about this book series, we've compared it to the New Jedi Order in several times in terms of scope, the number of titles involved, the number of characters and stuff like that. I would say in terms of characters, this is a bigger series, but in terms of impact on the fandom, certainly New Jedi Order I think has had more. But there's a lot of similarities to the books, including some stuff with. Anyway, I won't spoil this stuff. But there's a lot of similarities in these series, and I would say that I feel a similar satisfaction in the way that I felt satisfied finishing the New Jedi Order. I feel very satisfied finishing this series. So if you've read Trials of the Jedi, let me know your thoughts down below. I will have the spoiler video and many more videos finishing up the High Republic and talking about a bunch of stuff. But until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.